the steps didn't just guide me to, you know, find a solution where I'm not using drugs and alcohol. It helped me grow as a person, right? It helped me, you know, see where I can improve my life. And it wasn't the material things that he was showing me what the steps did. It was how he felt inside, right? I was so broken inside that I was willing to do anything if it meant opening up the first 164 pages of the big book and start going through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Guys always say, oh, it's my rock bottom. I was this. I've been homeless. Been lost my job, been lost all, and it doesn't matter about the bottom. It's when we stop digging, right? And when I finally stopped digging, step one makes me find a foundation, right? Realize that, hey, you are messed up, right? And let's start, right? And that you are hopeless, right? And, you know, you have a delusional mind, and the way that you think is insane. Coming out here helped me grow up a little bit. One thing that I am really passionate about is I'm passionate with helping people. That was something I really wasn't passionate about in the beginning, right? It wasn't something that I was like, hey, let me go out there and help somebody, right? It's through this program that made me see that I had a purpose, right? And one of those purposes, I love helping people. I talk to people in a lot of different walks of life, right? If it's from somebody that's just coming off the street to somebody that owns a multi-million-dollar company, right? I treat everybody. I live by this saying. I know everybody used to say, hey, treat everybody how you want to be treated, right? For me, right, not everybody wants to be treated like Johnrexx, right? So I treat people fair, right? And with me treating people fair, I'm able to meet people where they're at, right? And I'm able to, you know, help guide them a little bit, you know, and that's something I'm really passionate about, if it's from my, you know, in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous or the job that I have, right? I'm just passionate with helping people, you know, in my line of business where I work at, you know, that's what we do. I help people that are in the process of losing their home, right? I work with underwriters and I'm in the loss mitigation department, and I help underwriters come up with a solution to help homeowners keep their home, right? So everything that I do, I'm passionate about, right? And it always revolves around helping people.
Yep. And outside of work, how do you passionately help other people?
Man, I show up.
Okay.
Right? I show up where I need to be. I stay in H&Is, right?
For anybody that doesn't know.
H&I is hospital and institutions, right?
Okay.
So we go out, and somebody that's unable to have a meeting come in, right? We go into a treatment center or, you know, a detox, whatever it is, and we go share our solution of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm able to help those people if it's in just a meeting, right? I love talking to the newcomer, right? My favorite line in the book Alcoholics Anonymous tells us that we meet frequently so that the newcomer has the fellowship they seek, right? And that's something that I really needed, right? I needed a fellowship. I needed people to be around. And that's what I like to do. I like to shake hands with the newcomer. I always see my friends outside of the meetings, right? But I never get to see a newcomer. This might be the last meeting he comes to, right? So I want to make sure that he feels welcomed, right? Like, hey, man, I might not know you, but I love you, right? And there is something in somebody out here that we could help guide you to have that solution, because a lot of us didn't have that guidance, right? Because I sure didn't have a guidance growing up, right? I didn't have that father figure to tell me right or wrong, right? So I want to be that you know, that person that somebody could come to, either regardless if it's just a friend, somebody I just met, which is a complete stranger, or, you know, somebody at my job, right? I just always want to be able to show up and be able to be there for that person.
Right. No, yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. Thank you for that. And so for somebody that doesn't know or is probably scared to, right, like start the steps, you know, as most of us were, like, how did that process look like for you?
It was a struggle.
Okay.
Did not come in here willingly to be like, hey, I want to get sober and do the steps. I didn't even know what the steps looked like. I didn't know what, you know, how the steps were, but what it was my way of living wasn't working, right? And I remember getting high for the last time in treatment. I was in treatment center. I snuck some dope into the treatment center, and I ended up getting high. And for the first time, I was honest with another man. I was getting ready to leave. I wanted to ACA out of here. And this guy was asking me, like, hey, are you okay? And for the first time, I was completely honest, like, bro, I don't know what I'm doing, right? I feel like I'm not, if I go out there, I'm going to die. And he was like, well, you've been here for a couple of days, bro, and, you know, you haven't been doing nothing. Have you read the book? And when he was talking about the book, I didn't even know what book he was talking about, right? I know I've heard of the Rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've seen that big book, but it was just something I've ever opened up and turned to. And he sent me the detox, and there was a guy coming in. He's still a good friend of mine, and he started sharing his experience, right? And for the very first time in that full hour, I wasn't thinking about getting high. I wasn't thinking about leaving, right? I was able to hear the solution that this man was breaking down. And the solution he was breaking was the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And I was able to go in there with an open mind and be like, okay, maybe this might work for me, right? And it wasn't that I jumped into it right away, right? But I started reading the book a little bit, right? I started getting a sponsor, and these guys started taking me through the steps. And 20 days in, I had a sponsor come in, and he started breaking the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous down to me, right? Because when we first read that book, I'm a kid that, didn't have a high school diploma, right? Don't have a GED, never had a job, right? Don't know how to have communication skills with people. And the steps didn't just guide me to, find a solution where I'm not using drugs and alcohol. It helped me grow as a person, right? It helped me, see where I can improve my life, right? And I think that's what the steps did for me. And it was something that it took a lot of fighting. It took a lot of, feeling like it was being forced, right? But when I wholeheartedly was like, okay, it's time to take these steps seriously, I was able to be like, what do I have to lose? Right? Nobody's coming in here charging me to take me through the steps. They're not saying, hey, Johnrexx, you have to give me some money and I'm going to take you through all 12 steps. It's $5 a step. It was nothing like that, right? It was, hey, I'm here, if you're willing, and I'm going to find you a solution. And he broke those 12 steps down to me where it made sense, because I'm one of those people, like, you need to make it make sense to me. Like, like, I need to see the facts about this. Like, how is this working in your life today, right? And it wasn't the material things that he was showing me what the steps did. It was how he felt inside, right? I was so broken inside that I was willing to do anything if it meant opening up the first 164 pages of the big book and start going through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous,
Right. Thank you for that, man. That's beautiful, especially that you said, like, it helps you grow as a person, right? Like, because a lot of people, they come into 12-step program like not knowing, they've completely destroyed their lives, so they came in like not knowing how to live, how to take care of themselves, how to love themselves. So that's super important, man. And so like I want to get into the details of the steps, right? For anybody that might not know or isn't aware of how they look like other than just what they say on the wall, right?
Yeah.
What the steps really say. And so like how did that look like for you, a step-by-step guide? Hey, I wanted to take a quick second and thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch these videos. Hope you're enjoying the conversation as much as I am. If these videos have impacted you in any way possible, I would greatly appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe button. And if there's anything that you would like to see, whether it be like character development, something that has to do with recovery or spiritual growth, let me know in the comments and I'll implement it on my next video. Once again, thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, for me, right, the one thing about it is the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous ain't going to change, right? The 12 steps are outlined, right, for us to take into order, right? When I first went through the steps, and, any sponsor that starts sponsoring guys, right, we all put our own stamp on the book Alcoholics Anonymous, right? The step one might not look the same as somebody else's, right? So for me, this is just my experience on the 12 steps, right? I had a guy that came in and he started breaking down step one for me, right? Because I always thought drugs and alcohol were my problem, right? I'm like, oh, that's my problem. I need to stop doing drugs, right? And he broke it down in the book like, hey, like, when you're sitting here, right, and you're, completely sober, what are you thinking about, right? You thinking about getting high? And we sat across, I was unhooked at the time. I was in a treatment center. We're sitting in the cafeteria. And I'm like, bro, I'm thinking about getting high right now. I was 30-something days sober, and I'm like, bro, I'm thinking about getting high right now as you're speaking to me, right? And he was like, bro, people that aren't drug addicts and alcoholics aren't thinking about that, right? The way that my mind thinks is, dang, I wonder if, my dope dealer is going to give me a 2-for-1, The other normal person is at home like, I wonder if I lock the door. I wonder if there's milk and eggs in the refrigerator for the kids, right? My mind doesn't think like that. Right? The way that I think is messed up, right? Then he broke it down where when you're thinking like that, what happens? You know, the obsession is so strong that once you put it in your body, you get what is called the phenomenon of craving, right? And it talks about it doesn't happen in the average temperate drinker, right? It happens to a person like me. I put it in my body. It's like my body needs more and more and more. Right. Where then I have that abnormal reaction and consequences. No matter what I know I'm going to lose my family. I know I'm going to be homeless. I know that I'm going to lose my job, have no money in the bank account. But what do? I still pick up no matter what, right? And then he went down, he started breaking it down where inside of you, right, the reason why you go to drugs and alcohol, right, is you could be happy. Your solution is drugs and alcohol. You're completely having a bad day, angry. You go to drugs and alcohol. I could be sitting in the dark, nothing happening, my mind is blank. I'm going to go to drugs and alcohol. It doesn't matter the reason. That's what I find comfort in, right? Once you remove that from me, right, the book talks about I have that internal spiritual malady, right? In the doctor's opinion, it talks about alcoholism, right? It doesn't say, oh, alcohol. It says alcoholism, right? That internal spiritual malady, the ism inside of me that keeps me sick, right? And he broke that down to me that I have this spiritual disease that makes you, you know, go to these as the solution, right? And once you remove my solution from me, the book tells me that I'm irritable and discontented, right? And I'm sitting here and I'm like, I don't like life. I feel miserable, right? And he broke that down to me where I had to have a true step one experience because I always thought I know how to control my using, right? Like I'm not the guy pushing a buggy down the street. I cannot be an alcoholic, right? That can't be me. I'm not walking around with a brown paper bag and a 16-ounce, you know, 211 in there. That can never be me. And I start differentiating myself, right? And it doesn't matter about the drugs that you use, the alcohol that you use, the amount that you take, right? It doesn't matter if I started at 5 or I started at 35, right? What happens is once people like me put drugs and alcohol in my body, I react different than other people, right? And he broke that down to me, dude, and I was like, dang, you know? And he talked about it in step one, like, bro, you're basically, you know, you're basically effed up, right? There's nothing else that I can do or say or anybody in here that's going to help you find that, right? Which, you know, the main thing for me to find is God, right? So I went into that and I found that step one experience, dude, and in step one, they just want you to realize, like, you know, you're messed up, right? It doesn't, guys always say, oh, it's my rock bottom, I was this. I've been homeless, been lost my job, been lost, and it doesn't matter about the bottom. It's when we stop digging, right? And when I finally stopped digging, step one makes me find a foundation, right? Realize that, hey, you are messed up, right? And let's start, right? And that you are hopeless, right? And, you know, you have a delusional mind, and the way that you think is insane, right? And he broke that down to me, and I was like, dang, right? But then he gave me a little bit of hope, right? Everybody talks about how step one, we're hopeless, right? But my sponsor was like, let me give you a little bit of hope, right? Like, what is the reason you want to stay sober, right? And he gave me this list, give me 10 reasons why you want to stay sober. Wrote my 10 reasons why. And what was so crazy is some of that stuff was already happening before I was even through my steps, right? Because we only see like this narrow road. I don't see the bigger picture, right? What God has in store for me. All I see is what I want right now in this moment, right? And I admitted to my innermost self that I was a true alcoholic and a drug addict, right? And I had a true step one experience, right? Like, you are messed up. You'll never be able to do drugs like a normal person on the weekend. That was my thing. I just wanted to get sober so I could just do a little bit of drugs on the weekend. So I could go back to work Monday. Like a normal person, right? Like, you know, oh my gosh, I never realized when people say, oh, I have a hard day, a beer would taste good. Yeah. And it wasn't even the effect that it caused. You know, I know a lady that works at my job, and we went out, right, and we had a dinner for our company, and she was like, oh, it's been a hard day. And she ordered a non-alcoholic beer. Because she just wanted to taste, and she didn't even finish it. She just, you know, the taste or whatever she was talking. I can't relate to stuff like that. I'm like, non-alcoholic. Like, you might as well, you know, I don't even like beer, but you might as well get messed up, go get a couple shots, right? You had a hard day. If it was that hard, like, get a drink, you know? So I didn't be able to relate to that, right? And then we get into step two, right? And step two was, it was a struggle for me, steps 2 and 3. I struggle with the God thing, right? I came in here, I would see those steps on the wall, and I'm like, bro, this place is really kind of culty, dude. Right? I had my first 20 days of sobriety, I had like 8 to 9 sponsors. Because I kept dropping them. And it wasn't because of them, it was because of me. I had this blockage that was blocking me from God, right? And we get into step 2, and by this time, this is, my new sponsor. He's still my sponsor to this day, right? Almost 5 years later. And he broke down step 2 for me, right? And he broke down step 2 in a way I was able to understand it, right? And he was like, hey, because I grew up, when I left California at Hawaii at a young age, my mom and my dad then baptized me Catholic, right? And then we moved from California. I went to Hawaii. From Hawaii, I went to California, which was Santa Monica, and I moved with a half auntie that lived there. And they were Mormon, right? They lived in this nice house in Santa Monica. They were Mormon, taking me to this, Latter-day Saints church. And I was like, okay, like, it removed me from something I knew and put me into something that was really uncomfortable. Then I grew up there for about a year, and then from there we moved back out here. My grandma was really into church, and she was going to a non-denominational Christian church. And then from there it was like my grandma passes away, and the most important person in my life besides my mom is my grandma. She raised me since I was a young age, right? And she ended up passing away, and while she was in her deathbed, right, you hear all these things of, hey, she's going to be in a better place, right? Like, God got her, like, don't worry. And for me, the book talks about it that we're selfish and self-centered, right? I've been selfish and self-centered way before drugs and alcohol ever entered my body, right? And that's what the book is outlining. It's not the drugs and alcohol. It's the way that we feel once it's removed, right? I make everything about me, right? And I had such a deep resentment with God, like, this all-powerful being, all-knowing, needs my grandma more than me? Nah, heck nah. Like, this has to change. And it took me down a dark path, dude. And so when I came into here and they were talking about God, I struggle with that idea of God, right? And my sponsor broke down, and we agnostics, he broke down those 6 parts for me to have a relationship with God, right? And it talks about it, we talk to the new man and watch his hope rise as we discuss our alcoholics problems in our fellowship. I'm like, heck yeah, I love AA. Like, y'all buying newcomers food after meetings? Like, bet, I'm going to get the most expensive thing. Why? Because I'm selfish, right? It's not my money, so I'm going to spend your money up real well, And then when they talk about it, I'm like, okay, that seems kind of fun, right? Like, okay, I could get down with that. But then it says, watch his face fall when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention the word God. Right, and that's what it brought up for me, that childhood idea of God, right? And I'm like, oh, no, I can't get down with this, right? And I had that prejudice, right? Preconceived notions of what it's supposed to look like, right? And my sponsor broke it down to me, and he was like, don't even call it God, right? He was like, lay aside all prejudice of what you think you know of this God, right? Lay it aside, And then he was like, come up with a conception, right? Call it what you want. It's your conception, right? And we did like a list of characteristics of a good father figure, right? And a good friend. And I didn't have my father in my life, right? I never had a good friend in my life, right? I had acquaintances. So it was hard for me to be like, well, I don't know, right? So, and for us, bro, we always want to make it hard. We're always going to find a reason why I shouldn't have to do this, right? And I was like, I don't know what a father figure looks like. I don't even know what a good friend looks like. Like, I've never had those. And he was like, it's not about if you had it or not. He's like, what do you see these as, right? If you had your father in your life, how would you see this father? If you had a best friend in your life, how would you see this best friend? And he was like, how would you want to be as a father? How would you want to be as a best friend? At the time, I had a daughter, dude, and I was like, I can never be like my dad, right? And I made these characteristics, right? And, it was the loving, caring, a great listener, provider, right? I came up with all these characteristics, right? And he was like, call it what you want, right? Don't even call it God. So I used to call my higher power Sky Daddy or Big Homie, right? Oh, yo, I'm about to go talk to the Big Homie. I'm about to have Sky Daddy in my life, right? And I came up with this conception, and then he was like, you have to wholeheartedly seek him, right? He said, like, your God or your higher power don't make too hard turns for those who are really seeking God, right? I'm like, dang, am I really seeking God, right? And then he went into like, hey, right, now that you seek him, it talks about it in the book. He's like, what do these spiritual words mean to you? You know, like, what do these spiritual words actually mean to a person like you? I'm like, dang, I don't know, right? And I was like, let's find out, right? And I started, writing these little words down. Oh, this word, and it gives us a few examples in the book, right? Spirit of the universe, underlying the totality of things, right? And, creative intelligence. And it gives us all these different meanings in the book, right? And I have to ask myself what they mean to me, right? And when he did, he broke that down and he was like, all right. And then he's like, now are you willing to believe? And at that moment, I'm like, nah, man, I don't know about believing it, bro. Like, that's not something that I'm willing to do at this moment. You know what I'm saying? Maybe God ain't ready for me yet, you know? And in that step two promise, it tells us, right, we empathetically assure him, right? Like, we guarantee you, bro, right? If you have this connection with God, you are on your way, right? And I had to really ask myself, am I willing to believe, right? And it wasn't I was willing to believe at the moment for God, but I was willing to believe in my sponsor, right? I was willing to believe that whatever is in his life is working, right? And I was willing at that moment to believe in him, right? I was willing to believe in Unhooked. I was willing to believe in those H&Is and those guys bringing a meeting in. I was willing to believe in that because whatever it was working in these people's lives. And then from there, he asked me, like, it's now, there's no middle of the road, right? Either God is everything or he's nothing. He either is or he isn't, right? And then it gives us that choice, right? Like, what's your choice, right? I had to ask myself, like, what am I going to do from here, right? And I was like, all right, well, Sky Daddy it is, right? And I was able to go into, have a step two experience where, it talks about that cornerstone so fixed in place, ain't nothing going to shake it. Right, no matter what my day looks like today, my cornerstone is so fixed. My connection with God is so solid that no matter what happens, it doesn't get wobbly, And I was able to have that cornerstone just boom, jammed up in there, right? And then he went into step three, right? And he was like, hey, this is what I need you to do for step three, right? He was like, we get into right after the ABCs and how it works, right? And he was like, I need you to write this out in first person, right? Being convinced, right? And for me, step three, it is the actor scenario, but the actor scenario is for me to get to that point, right? Step three is the prayer, right? It's for me to have that connection with God, right? But that actor scenario is getting me to be convinced that I'm there. Look at how it looks, right? And the very first point is I have to quit playing God, right? Like, bro, being convinced that my life run when I'm doing it doesn't work, right? I try to run the show. I love how the book talks about an actor, right? Bro, we aren't that important. You know what I'm saying? But best believe I'm like the producer or the director. I'm going to show you how it needs to be done, why it needs to be this way, and what's going to happen, right? And when I do that, I'm like, all of a sudden, the real director, God, says, play. And all of a sudden, people are bumping into things, falling over, doing this, right? And it doesn't go what it's supposed to do. Why? Because I think I know better than God, right? And then it goes into it like we were just talking about, like that selfishness and self-centeredness, right? The book talks about a fear, right? 1,000 forms of fear, right? And when I was telling my sponsor, I'm like, bro, I ain't scared of nothing, right? And he broke it down in a way where I'm like, oh yeah, spiders, clowns, I'm scared of that. Like, it's not those type of fears that the book is talking about, right? It's those internal fears, right? The fear that I'm not good enough, right? The fear that I'm never gonna amount to nothing, right? The fear that I'm gonna be lonely for the rest of my life, right? Like, those are the fears the book is talking about, right? And when I'm living in those fears, what happens? I start acting out in selfish, self-centered ways, right? These character defects start coming out of me, right? And this is just, again, my experience, right? Guys always say, when you're living in fear, you're not trusting in God, which can't be entirely true, right? Because God gave me a fear, right? When you're a young kid and you see a lion or a tiger, I don't say, oh my gosh, I trust in God, let me go hug the lion. Like, no, it's when I'm driven by that fear, right? I go home and I think the tiger's in my room. I think the tiger's there with me, right? And I'm driven by a fear that makes me act out in certain ways, right? And that's what the book is describing. It says I'm driven by a fear, right? It doesn't say, oh, you're living or you're in this fear, right? When I'm in a fear, I have a solution today, right? Doesn't mean that we can't be living in fear. You know, like, and then, again, that's just my experience with it, right? And he breaks it down more, right? He says, this is the how and why, right? You need to stop playing God, bro. Like, you need to stop acting like you know better than God, right? And when he said that, I'm like, damn, so true, right? And then he broke down those step 3 promises for me, right? And one of the things that used to hit home for me was I was unable to face life successfully. You know what I'm saying? I used to wake up every single day and be like, bro, this is life. Like, this is my life, right? I'm just going to be sober, going to meetings, doing this. And it was early in sobriety when I was going through these steps. And he was talking. I'm like, bro, this cannot be my, like, for the rest of my life, I have to be doing this? Yeah. Like, I'm like, bro, I don't know about all that, right? Because I was still trying to control things and make it how I wanted to see fit, right? And then I wasn't ready to have God enter into my life, right? And then I remember reading these actor scenarios to these dudes, right? And one of the guys was like, how's your prayer? You know, I'm like, bro, I don't pray. Yeah. Like, bro, I'd just be like, hey, big homie, appreciate you, boom, done, right? And I was like, I wouldn't even get on my hands and knees. I would lay in the bed, right? And he told me, like, throw your cigarettes under the bed. At the time, I was smoking cigarettes. Like, just throw your cigarettes under the bed, bro. And while you're down there and picking up the cigarettes and you're on your knees, say a quick prayer. I did it for a little bit, right, throwing the cigarettes under the... It was no prayer at first, right? But something overcame me one day. I was like, just talk to him, right? And I started talking, right? I started having a relationship, right? And when I got into that relationship, we got into that step 3 prayer. And he was like, while you're down there, say the step 3 prayer. You know, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt, right? And when I would say that, bro, I'm like, hold up, bro. I don't talk like that. The doubts and the thilts and the wilts and the deeds, and that's not me, right? So it wasn't feeling like it was a personal connection with me and my higher power, right? And the wording, right, it talks about it on page 63 a little bit more down. It says the wording is, of course, quite optional, as long as I'm voicing without reservation. Sky Daddy, I offer myself to you, big homie, to do with me and do with me as you gonna do. Relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do your will, right? And I made it personal to a person like me, right, where I was able to wholeheartedly start having that connection with God, right? I started opening the door, and I was able to have what the book calls that triumphant arc, right?
So you came as yourself.
Came as myself, right? I didn't try to come as, you know, my sponsor or this person or that person, right? Because the book where my sponsor was breaking it down, it talks about if I could only believe like that man could believe. Yeah. If only I pray like that man, maybe it could work for a motherfucker like Johnrexx, right? But then it says it was easy to know that we could commence to a simpler level, right? And when they said that, I was like, you making it too hard, Rex? Like, you doing way too much, bro. Like, make it a little bit more where it's comforting for you, right? And it made it a little bit more comforting for me, where I was able to be like, okay, now I'm able to go into this, right? And once I did that, I remember my sponsor coming to do step 3 with me for the first time after I did my actor scenario. And he was like, okay, we're gonna get on our hands and knees and pray, right? And at the time I wasn't, you know, I was already on my hands and I was praying, but I was like, nah, bro, I can't do it right now, right? Like, what if somebody sees me? I was like so ashamed of the relationship, and I was just coming in where I'm like, I can't be seen praying, right? Like, it was like, today, now I don't care who's around, but then I was like, there's no way, bro. Like, and when I first went to Unhooked, they told me it was co-ed, right? But I never saw them ever. Never saw the women ever. And the very first time I did see them, we were sitting there's a room in the very front of the building when you first come in at the sliding doors, and we're sitting in this conference room, and we get on our hands and knees and we're doing the third step prayer. And I remember after we did it, I stood up after the amen, and I turned around, and it's a glass window, and it's like 15 to 16 women just standing there. And when I say I had this, like, at first it was like this thought like, dang, but then it was a thought like I did that. And I feel okay about it. You know? Like, I didn't feel ashamed or like guilty that I was praying. It was like, oh snap, I've never seen him. And it was like it was humbling in that moment, right? Because I make my pride and ego will tell me otherwise.
Right.
Right? And when my ego gets in the way, all that is we edge God out, right? There's no room for God when it's all about me, right? And I heard this guy talk. It was really good actually. Over the he was like, when we breathe in God, we exhale self. You know, I'm like, that is exactly what we do. You know, I need to breathe God in and let Johnrexx out, right? And I started doing that, dude, and I was able to get into my 4 and 5, right? 4 and 5, bro. A lot of people, be like, oh, I can't do it. I can't. Bro, you were talking about it last night at the meeting, dude. I was like, bro, I was willing to do that. Like, oh, bro, oh, you want to know what this person did to me, bro? It was so easy to do it, right? First column, right? My mom, right? The who, right? And then the why, like, why my mom? My mom kicked me out the house when I was 13 years old. What type of mother would do that to their son, to a child, right? How it affected me. Pocketbook, mama ain't giving me no more money, right? My self-esteem, my security, right? Ambitions, I feel less than, right? Personal relationship with my mom, right? And how it affects, right? But we don't never want to see that fourth column, right? We don't want to see that, but like, you see how quick it was easy to do the first 3, right? And then when my sponsor sat down with me and I had all this written out and all these resentments, right? I had like a lot of resentments, like a bunch, right? I put the lady at McDonald's who put mayo on my cheeseburger. I told that lady, don't put mayo on my cheeseburger. Told her 3 times in the drive-thru. What'd she do? She put mayo on my cheeseburger, right? I threw the sandwich back through the window, right? Like, that's how I would live my life, right? And I thought it was okay for the longest time, right? And then my sponsor, we sit down and we do my 5th step right after we do, these 4 columns, right? I get into the resentments, right? I get into the fears, right? And then we get into that sexual inventory, right? And when we get into that, I sit down with this man, and we sat down for like 6 to 7 hours, dude. And I'm so grateful for that man. He never missed a beat. Showed up every single week, right? And we learn from these type of men, right? Like, at first, bro, the book talks about it, and there's no fees to pay, no axes to grind, nobody, no lectures to be in there. Like, nobody was forcing my sponsor to be there, right? He was coming out of the kindness of his heart, just like the book says, the soul, just to be helpful, right? Like, that was it. He just wanted to be of service, right? And he came and we sat down and we did my 5th step, bro, on Christmas Day. This man could have been at home with his family, you know what I'm saying? But he came and saw me, right? And we sit down and we do this 5th step, dude. And I'm throwing all this out there, right? And I'm doing a whole bunch of me. This is why I'm wrong. This is why it happened. And we get to the one with my mom and we do the my part, right? What is my part in the situation? Bro, you're a liar, right? You're disrespectful. You're inconsiderate. You're a thief. You steal from your own mother. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't be trusted. You're egotistical, right? And he started throwing these words out at me. And as he's sitting there and we're going through this 5th step, he gives me this list, dude. In my mind, I was like, I'm about to knock him out. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm about to knock this dude out. Like, who are you to call me all of these things, right? And the reason why, because my pride is hurt. Right now, I'm feeling less than like I really am a piece of shit, bro. Like, you really are what he's throwing out there to you. Like, how could you be mad when this is how you act, right? And when he gave me these lists of character defects, dude, and we get into 6 and 7, he starts breaking this down, right? And he gives me this list, right? And my alcoholic mind, right? I'm like, oh, I'm gonna pray for these, and it's gonna be gone. Yeah, exactly. Like, it's gonna be removed, right? And the main thing I was missing from it, because in 6 and 7 in the big book, like, we do use the 12 and 12 for it, right? But in the big book, it's 2 paragraphs, right? But in step 6, I have to be praying for that willingness. If I'm not willing to have these removed, then what am I doing? I'm just doing foxhole prayers, right? And at the moment, bro, when I was praying on these character defects, I had no willingness to have them removed. Who doesn't like, the book says, who doesn't like feeling a little bit better than the next, right? Like, who doesn't like feeling, superior, right? Like, until they start hurting us, right? Then I'm like, oh man, this got to go, right? And you know, I can't be doing this, right? And what happens is we start saying, oh, it's a character. People love saying, oh, it's just my character defects.
Right, right.
No, bro, you're fully aware of that. You're acting in bad behavior. Can't be a character defect when you're fully aware of these things, right? The book talks about it's a shortcoming. It just comes out, right? If you're just living in it, doing what you're doing, bro, that's bad behavior, right? You can't keep saying, oh, it's my character defects. We love throwing that out there now that we're fully, I used to say that all the time, oh, I just act like that because it's my character defect. No, bro, you're fully aware of how you're acting, bro. That's bad behavior, bro, you know? And he broke that down to me, and we started getting into the book, right? And I started praying on these character defects, right? And what it talks about, and I'm like, it's not for us to find out when it needs to be removed. It's all in due timing, right? It's God's timing for these things, right? And what happened is I prayed, and these things the next day, they weren't removed. I woke up the next day, my roommate was snoring, and I damn near wanted to smuggle him, right? And I'm like, I thought I prayed for these to be removed, right? And that's not what happened, right? It was all in God's timing, right? And, you know, after we got through these character defects, before that I did you know, just to go back a little bit, after we got done with my fifth step, I went home, back to, you know, my little room in the rehab, and I did a power hour, right? And when I did this power hour on this fifth step, and I was praying on these, you know, these resentments, these fears, you know, my sexual inventory, right? And when I was praying on these sexual inventories, I was praying on these things, right? And it tells us, you know, you know, we look at the first 5 proposals, right? And is my work solid so far, right? And I started asking myself these questions. And I'm like, this is solid work, bro. Like, I had a lot written out, bro. We sat there, and I'm like, this is solid, dude. And as I was doing that, I was praying on the fears, right, of what God, to help God remove these fears from me, right, and what He would have me be. I was able to come up with a list of what God would have me be, right, more loving, being less selfish, right, be more supportive, you know, show up, stop lying, right, and all these things of God would have me be, where I was able to come up with, you know, my sexual inventory, right? And everybody always makes it seem like the sexual inventory is about the woman or the man, or it's not about that, right? Your sexual inventory is about you. If I'm living up, how am I living up to this sexual inventory, right? If I want to be somebody that's loving, caring, kind, and how can I expect that from somebody else, and I don't live that way, right? And everybody thinks it's about the relationship. No, bro, I bring my sexual inventory when it comes to my relationship with the woman, my friends, people. Like, how am I acting for me to be out there in this life, right? And come up with that sexual inventory. We get into 6 and 7. I get these character defects, dude. And we meet up the next week, and we get into steps 8 and 9, right? 4 and 5 was the hard part was that, you know? And I was like, oh, I don't owe nobody in the man. I told myself, he was like, bro, you have a long list in 4 and 5. The book says you made your list when you did your 4th step. You know, so he's like, you owe a man to all those people. I'm like, hell no, I don't. You know, like, I can't do that, right? Nobody wants to admit they're wrong. I don't care when nobody comes in here like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get to steps 8 and 9 and go start trudging the line. Haven't met one yet, you know? But when you get to that moment, right, that's where God starts, like you talk, like that's where God starts meeting you, right? Like that's where the action starts being taken, right? Like now we did all this, you know, removing what's blocking us from God, seeing why, you know, we act how we act, right? We get those lists of character defects, and then now it's time to go put some action, right? It's time to clean up our side of the street, right? And I made my list of amends, dude. I started making some amends, dude, but one amends that I had to make, I didn't even know was on there, right? By this time, I was, you know, just to share a amends story, I remember we were at Glenfair Lanes. I was through my steps, dude, and I was with my baby mom, some other people, my daughter, all of us were at this bowling alley on 59th and Bethany at Glenfair Lanes. And I used to bowl there as a kid. My grandpa used to be in a bowling league, and I used to bowl in this Tootsie Rollers league, you know. And I used to be there, like, the bowling alley used to be my home away from home when I was a kid, you know. And I remember going there. At the time, I was I wasn't even 21 yet, you know, and I was over there messed up, drinking, right? All like all I had was like had a little bottle, I was getting drunk in this bowling alley, and security came up to me, right, and they kicked me out. Right, I'm like got angry. Right, at the time I was on Xanax, so I don't even remember this. Right, and we get kicked out of the bowling alley. Right, and as I get kicked out of this bowling alley, right, my baby mom's, you know, I just started talking to her. Like I was like, I think I was at the time I was just about to be turning 21, you know, and it was her 21st birthday. Like she was already 21, and we're having a good time, and we get kicked out of this bowling alley, you know. And when I got kicked out the bowling alley, I threw a drink on the security, like threw a drink on the not the security, but the guy that was working the front desk, because he snitched me out. I'm like, bro, who are you to tell on me, bro? You know, and I threw a drink on this dude, right? I have no recollect. I don't recall doing that, right? Because I was messed up off Xanax, bro. Like I don't remember what happened. I woke up the next day. I was like, oh, we must have had a really good night. And time passes. Right now, I'm in sobriety. Right, and we're back at this bowling alley. The same guy that was working at the front desk is now like the manager. He's like the general manager there or whatever. And we had a great time. I was kind, you know, like we were going great. And the dude was like, oh, you guys are, you know, a good crowd. Like, you know, thank you. Like, you guys are fun. And, you know, because you know us, we're going to go turn up, right? And we're going to have fun in sobriety. And my baby mom's was like, hey, like, it's crazy. Like, you know, you're being nice to this dude. She was like, you threw a drink on that guy, right? Most of the times we don't know. A lot of these men start coming back, you know, and I'm like, dang. And I remember, like, in that moment, I'm like, well, he don't remember, you know, so I don't really owe him an amends, right? And we start bowling the rest of the night, right? And God has a little way of just hitting you in the heart, you know. He'll tap that heart, especially when you have a conscious contact with him, you know, and it was just hitting my heart all night. I was just like, you know, I was bowling. I wasn't having no much, you know, that much fun no more. I see this man. He's just smiling, being kind. And I'm like, dang, bro, like, I really don't want to do this, you know. And I went to go make an amends to this dude. I was like, hey, man, I owe you an amends. Are you willing to hear it? He was like, what are you talking about? You know, like, you guys been lovely. You know, I was like, it was a time here, you know, some years ago, like really, like, bro, this was like 10 years ago. I was up here, we were bowling, and I threw a drink in your face. You know, it was really disrespectful. You know, it was unloving. You know, I was being, you know, selfish, you know, and I made that whole situation about me. You know, did I leave anything out? He looked at me and was like, no. You know, I was like, what can I do to make this right? You know, I was still early in sobriety at the time. And he looked at me and he was like, hey, man, like, he was like, are you in the program or something? You know? I was like, you know, I am. I work a program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we have to clean our side of the street. And he was like, I really appreciate you doing that. He was like, but I have a brother, right? He's like, I do have something you could do to make it right. He's like, I have a brother. You know, he's gay, and he's struggling with drugs and alcohol, right? And we took him to some meetings, and it was alcoholics meeting, and he was talking about drugs, and the people in the meeting like shut him off, right? Yeah. And he was like, so he's not able to relate with people. He was like, can you just give him a call? Just give him a call, right? So I gave him my number, right? And in those amends, bro, like, this is, you know, the book says 9 out of the 10 the unexpected will happen, right? Like, that's not an amends I knew about or I was willing to go make or whatever, right? But in that moment, bro, I got to pick up a sponsee. Right? I sponsored that kid. He was like one of my first sponsees. He used to pull up to the Glade House and do step work. He used to have his nails done, you know, and all that, dude. And he got through all 12 steps, dude. And in that moment, dude, that dude stayed sober for a year, you know. And he ended up passing away, right? He ended up getting back in this relationship. But in that moment, dude, I remember talking to his parents, bro, and they were like, hey, thank you. Because for that year, bro, they were able to have their son back, right? And it had nothing to do with me. right? That had nothing to do with me. That was all God, right? Leading me to making amends that I did not want to have to do, right? Like, that's the power of these amends, right? If we don't make it, bro, you never know what's going to happen. Why? Because we're so driven by that fear of, oh my gosh, they're going to think of me differently, right? It's going to be this way, right? That's my expectation of what I think it's supposed to look like, and I had to do that with many amends. Lay aside those expectations of what I think this amends is going to look like, because all amends aren't going to be the same, right? Some people said, I don't want nothing to do with you. My aunt did that for me almost till I got to my 4 years of sobriety, where she was able to wholeheartedly talk to me like, I'm willing to hear your amends now. Some people don't want nothing to do with me, right? But what the one thing the book says is, when the time comes, best believe I'm willing to make that amends, right? Like, I'm willing to make that amends, right? And then my sponsor took me into step 10, right? And he was like, hey, now we're gonna learn how to do an on-the-spot inventory. Bro, that was the one thing I failed at utterly for like the first 18 months. I never did a 10 and 11. I wasn't doing 10 and 11s, bro. Like, that's where we get that conscious contact with God. That's where I'm in connecting with God, right? And then step 10, I get into it, and the book outlines when these fears crop up, when I'm feeling afraid, right? I'm feeling resentful, and when these things crop up, what am I supposed to do about it? The main thing I would always do, bro, it's easy for me to call an alcoholic, call a friend, right? Because what happens? I seek finite answers from finite humans, right? Because I'm like, I want somebody to justify, rationalize with me, enable the bullshit I'm about to tell you, right? That's why I go to humans. That's what we all do, right? Because they're good.
Yeah, can you explain like what an on-spot inventory is for somebody that might not know?
Yeah.
Like what a 10-step like.
Yeah, so when I'm feeling angry, right, for example, I get angry at my coworker, right? And now I'm angry where I'm ready to punch him out, right? The book tells me when I'm feeling that way, there's 4 parts that I'm supposed to be doing, right? That first part, it tells me, hey, you got to go pray to God, right? Once you pray to God, call somebody, call your sponsor, call another alcohol, call someone, right? Then after I do that, it tells me what I'm supposed to do after that. Then I make amends if I faulted somebody, right? If I did harm or I caused any type of harm, you got to go make that right immediately. It doesn't say go make it later, go make it a week later. No, it says immediately, promptly, like right now, right? And then once I do that, that fourth part that we always miss, right? We always miss the first part and then the last part. Because we're selfish and stuff. As soon as we get what we want, we're like, okay, I'm feeling better now, right? And that fourth part is I got to turn my thoughts to help someone, right? It doesn't say go help an alcoholic. It could be anyone, or I could go help a random stranger. I could open the door for somebody. It just says get out of yourself, right? And when I would do those 10 steps, bro, I wasn't doing those wholeheartedly, bro. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to just call somebody. I start feeling better. I call somebody in the room who I know. You know who's doing 10 steps and you know who's not. I'm calling the guy who ain't. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to call the guy that's going to enable me. Right? Because that's what that was the easier way for me to do. I tell myself, oh, yeah, I did a 10 step. I called this person. I was angry, blah, 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 right? But this person's not going to hold me accountable. Today, I could call you and do a 10 step, but you're going to tell me, hey, bro, this is where you were wrong. Right? This is the character defect you were living in. Right, now you got to go make that right, bro, and make sure that you go get right with God and go help somebody afterwards, right? Because now I know that I don't go to people I go to God, but I do what the book outlines in step 10, right? And then, I get into a step 11, which is on page 86, right? And when I get into step 11, it's a nightly, right? Step 10 is throughout my day, right? If I do any type of stuff throughout my day, I have a tool that helps me get back centered with God. Right, and then at night, if I miss, let's say, because we're human, we might miss some stuff that we were angry at or we did wrong throughout the day, right? That's where I'm able to get back right in step 11, right? I'm able to take this to meditation, and I look at these, on page 86, right? And I'm able to see where what happened throughout my day. Was I angry? Was I resentful? Did I keep something to myself, right? What should I have done better? You know what I'm saying? When am I packing into the stream of life, right? And I started looking at this nightly, and I started looking at it, and I'm like, dang, bro, I started doing this, and this, right? I did this, right? And Then I get to wake up in the morning and ask God to help me from that day before, right? The one thing is, if we're practicing a proper step 11, we don't have that many step 10s throughout the day. Because what it tells us in step 11 is I pause when agitated, right? Like when we were at the restaurant, right? The old me, right? I would have spazzed off on the waitress for dropping a drink on me. But in that moment, instead of me about to, what I was going to say didn't come out. But God was like, hold up, bruh, pause, take a step back and just, hey, it was an accident. Accidents happen. She left. I was able to, I talked a little stuff afterwards, right? But then I still made it right with her because I felt bad, right? I know she felt bad. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, like it was an accident. Accidents happen, right? Because I seen the look, right? I seen how she was feeling, right? Like how selfish of me for her to be acting a certain type of way, right? And when I do that, bro, is I'm connected with God in those moments, right? The book talks about that we have a daily reprieve contingent to my spiritual condition, right? If I'm spiritually sick throughout the day, everybody's gonna know. Like if you know me, bro, when I'm spiritually sick, bro, I walk around and it's like a chips on my shoulders, dude. I have this look. I'm just like, don't even. As soon as you say something wrong, bro, and I'm able to have that connection with God, bro. Like that relationship we have with God today is not gonna be the same tomorrow. The relationship we had yesterday is not gonna be the same today. Right? It's a new relationship because why? I got to keep going to God all day, throughout my day, not just in the morning and night. I remember a guy telling me, he used to be my great-grand sponsor, and he was like, hey, how many times you pray? I said, bro, I was like, bro, I pray at night and in the morning, bro. Like, I thought that was enough, right? He was like, that's it? I'm like, bro, what you mean that's it? Like, bro, that's a lot of prayer and a lot of prayer. Because I wasn't meditating, right? Because it's hard, right? And he was like, bro, like that's it? Like you're dealing with untreated alcoholism for 24 hours of the day, right? And I was like, well, I sleep, and my smart ass, well, I sleep for 8 hours. Okay, well, 16 hours of the day, And he was like, but in the rest of the day, you're only going to God for like 5-10 minutes, and then 5-10 minutes. So 10 to 20 minutes of your day is God, and then the rest is all self. Well, when you put it like that, I guess, right? And that's how I had to realize, like, you have to be bringing God throughout your whole day, not just when it's convenient for you, right? And the main thing that we miss in step 11, it says prayer and meditation. It doesn't say prayer and prayer or meditation and meditation, right? It's prayer and meditation, right? So I had to pray, and I started it was so crazy, dude. You learn so much through people, like everybody's like, oh, I go to this guy, he has so many years, and bro, I learned this from this newcomer, dude. You know what I'm saying? I was talking to this newcomer, and some people they're just on fire, right? And at the time I had a few years, and he was talking about his meditation. I was just getting back and doing these meditations, getting back right with God, and I heard him say, we were talking, and he was like, bro, how do you do with your meditations? I'm like, bro, like, I don't know. I try to do like 3-10 minutes. Like I try to do, something, 5 minutes here, 6 minutes here. And he told me, he was like, hey, bro, like, why are you putting limitations on God? Right? And I'm like, boy, he was like, what if God wanted to show up? You said you do 4-minute meditations. What if God wanted to show up at 5? I was like, whoa, right? Like that's so true, right? Because when we're praying, I'm having a conversation with God, right? That's all it is conversation, right? And when I'm meditating, I'm listening, right? So when he broke that down, he's like, how are you going to listen to what God has in store if you say you only have 4 minutes? He's like, how selfish are you to be God? You only have 4 minutes to show up in my life. If you don't, I'll holler at you tomorrow. And when he said that, bro, it made so much sense to me. I'm like, bro, it talks about it in our readings, bro. Like, we don't put limitations on God. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not out here burning energy foolishly no more, right? God gives me this energy where I'm able to just move around because why? It's not no selfish motives behind the things that I'm doing, right? When I have selfish motives, that's why I'm angry. I'm tired. I don't want to do this. I feel worn out. Why? Because it's selfish motives. When I have right motives and it's God's will for me, I'm going to be able to show up, right? And he broke that down. I was talking to this dude, and that's why I'm always learning, right? It doesn't matter about the time, bro. The book says in step 3 that we are reborn. When you have 5 years, my daughter's 8 years old. I don't know no 8-year-old that's spiritually fit. You get what I'm saying? Guys with 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, we're still growing in the likeness of our Creator, right? So we're still growing spiritually, right? Because we are reborn. This is a new life that we're living. We don't know how to live life. So now we're trying to figure that out, right? And I'm always growing and learning, even if it's from somebody that has 60, 90, 6 months. You get what I'm saying? And then we get into step 12, right? And he breaks the step 12 down for me. And he was like, all right, now it's time to go start trudging this line, right? Time for you to start start sponsoring guys, right? And, the book talks about you have a spiritual awakening, right? And it wasn't that I had a burning bush moment, right? But what it was one day I'm in traffic. Traffic is always one of those things that a lot of us get angry over, right? And I remember in traffic, some stuff happened, I'm waiting, and I was calm, right? And I felt kind of like, bro, what is this? Right? Like, traffic usually makes me angry, makes me mad, like, but you were calm, right? And I called my sponsor, like, hey, bro, like, I'm sitting in traffic right now, and I'm calm. He was like, hey, bro, you're serene. Like, you have a perspective change today, right? The way that you think is not how you used to think before, right? And I was like, whoa, My daughter likes to say, dude, like she learned when there's traffic and somebody cuts us off or doing something, she'll be like, oh, they must be on a great adventure, huh, Dad? And I'm like, they are, baby. They are on a great adventure, right? But I started, having that spiritual awakening, right? And then, it talks about us sponsoring guys and carrying this message to the other alcoholics, right? And as you said so beautiful last night, bro, like how selfish of us to miss that experience, right? If I'm just coming in here because I want to go to a meeting, because I'm doing this, I'm doing that, bro, I used to be that guy, like, I need a meeting. Oh, I need a meeting. I need to go to a meeting. Not today, bro. I go to God. You know what I'm saying? If I'm struggling, I'm going to God. And I'm going to talk to somebody about it, right? What I go to meetings for today is to carry that message, right? Like, it's to carry a message that holds that depth and weight. I could go in there and talk to a new guy today, and they know that sincerity that's in our eyes and that we mean business, right? Like, that's why I go to the meetings. I go to the meetings so I could talk to a newcomer, right? Not because I'm feeling sick inside or I'm feeling a certain type of way where I'm like, oh, my gosh, I need a meeting. Like, that's not what I go to meetings for today. You know what I'm saying? Because if I needed a meeting that bad, then I must be lacking somewhere, right? And I need to go back through and see where I'm losing that connection, right? What's causing me to act a certain type of way, right? Because it's not the meeting, it's not the person, it's not that. There's something deep down inside that is blocking me from God, and I got to get to that, right? Page 52 tells me that, right? Those bedevilments, right? I can't make a living. I have no control over my emotional natures. I can't be a real help, right? I'm useless, right? And when I'm feeling like that, it's because that connection with God is blocked somewhere, right? And it's not the people or the places, the things. It's something inside of me internally that's making me act this way, right? And then we practice these principles, not just in the rooms, right? Like today, I'm in leader. I'm a supervisor in a mortgage company, and that's practicing your principles. I'm a felon. You know what I'm saying? I rob still, you know what I'm saying? I do all these things, right? But today, I get to show up where, I'm of maximum service, right? The book tells us that we are maximum service of God and the people about us. About us don't mean in the room of Alcoholics Anonymous only. You know what I'm saying? It's that Circle K worker that you're sitting there talking to, right? It's that, that lady that you just opened the door for. Right? It's your mom, it's your dad, it's your family members, right? It's your job, right? Like, you want to know you really practicing principles in all your affairs? Go talk to your manager. You know what I'm saying? Go talk to that Circle K lady that you just engaged with, right? Go talk to the people that, that know you, right? When I practice these principles in all your affairs, bro, like, life starts having new meaning, right? It starts feeling a little bit more different, because now you're not that person that's an a-hole walking around with a chip on their shoulder that nobody wants to be around. Today, you're a pillar. You're a light in these rooms. You know what I'm saying? People know, like, hey, I could call Johnrexx and he's going to answer the phone call. You know, they know that, hey, if Johnrexx can't make it, he might talk a little stuff, right? But he's gonna show up, right? Like, that's not me, right? That's not something I've done, right? And that's through these 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? It's through my experience that I was able to have this experience through the 12 steps, through great sponsorship, right? Great men like you coming before and always leading that path, right? Because with my own thinking, I end up homeless, right? But today, that triumphant arc that we're passing into freedom is there because I have a connection with God, right? And like I talked about in the beginning, dude, like Sky Daddy and Big Homie is no longer a thing, right? Like, yeah, it's funny to talk about, but today the most important thing in my life is God, right? I do not get on my hands and knees and not pray. I do not sit with a guy before step work and do a prayer before we just sit down and do a session, right? Like before any meal. It doesn't matter who's around. You get what I'm saying? Like, I'm so firm with God that it doesn't matter who is watching and what's going on, right? Because I am not ashamed of what God has done for me. Like, he really pulled me out of out of hell, right? He was like, here you are, now let's see what you can do, right? And I'm like, I'm so grateful for that, right? I'm so grateful that I'm able to, sit here today, and have somebody like you that I get to call a best friend. You know what I'm saying? Like somebody that I have true friends today. Like, don't want nothing from me. You know what I'm saying? They don't want nothing from me but to help me succeed and be there for me, right? Even in my darkest moments, without judgment. And that was something I never had, and that's what I found through the 12 steps in Alcoholics Anonymous,
Yeah. Damn, that was good, man. Thanks so much, bro. Like that was beautiful. Just the way that you broke it down, man, especially with your experience, and like you stayed true to the 12 steps and how they're outlined in the book, right? And you described the purpose of the 12 steps, which is to get us connected to something greater than ourselves, regardless of how it looks to anybody else, right? Like you made it personal to you, and like you're a true pillar, and you walk, right? Like you walk this work, man. And so, yeah, I mean, that was basically step by step guide, bro. And so I appreciate you doing this. Unfortunately, we ran out of time a little bit, but it's all good, man. I appreciate you doing this, for real.
Yeah, man, thank you for having me. I love you, buddy.
Love you too, brother.